Hello and welcome to this World Wellbeing Movement Insights webinar this afternoon on how to boost employee wellbeing with the Work Wellbeing Playbook. I'm Jonathan Whitney, and as I mentioned, have the absolute pleasure of introducing three of the experts behind the playbook who will be sharing their insights with you over the next hour or so. Each of them are going to focus on a key element or driver of wellbeing at work. And we'll make sure we've got plenty of time at the end for your questions. So please do submit your questions as we're going through on the Q&A function on the Zoom menu below. Before I hand over to our first expert, I just wanted to give a quick reminder of what the Work Wellbeing Playbook is for those of you who may be unfamiliar. Researchers from our academic partner, the Wellbeing Research Centre at the University of Oxford, conducted a systematic literature review of more than 3,000 academic studies, looking at the efficacy of interventions designed to boost and improve workplace wellbeing. Now, we've curated those findings about the most effective interventions, basically what works, for whom and where, into a succinct evidence-based playbook, categorized by these 12 key drivers of workplace wellbeing. Now, this afternoon, we're going to be digging deeper into three of those drivers: trust, learning, and appreciation. We don't have time to go into all of them, but if you're interested in the areas of stress, purpose, and inclusion and belonging, I can absolutely urge you to check out our previous webinar on the World Wellbeing Movement YouTube channel. This first iteration of our playbook is kindly supported by Indeed, and I'm delighted to say is available completely free of charge and open access at worldwellbeingmovement.org/playbook. Just a word of warning though, before you start, because this has been a super quick introduction, for more tips on how to make the most of the playbook, I really recommend taking the time to read our guidance around measuring workplace wellbeing and implementing interventions in your workplace. Which can also be found at that same link, worldwellbeingmovement.org/playbook. And we've made it as easy as possible for you. We've created a little tile there, making the most of this resource. So please do read our guidance and watch the short video before you dig in. So that's more than enough from me. Without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Cherise Regier to talk about fostering and maintaining trust in the workplace. And I'll see you a little bit later on.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. And thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to join today's webinar. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about trust. So workplace trust is an employee's confidence in their organization, its leaders, and their coworkers to act with integrity, fairness, and competence. Unsurprisingly, trust fosters a safe work environment where employees feel supported and valued. Research has found that trust is an essential ingredient for promoting workplace cooperation, which in turn leads to enhanced levels of well-being and performance. On an individual level, employees are more likely to express their ideas, collaborate with their peers, exhibit higher levels of commitment and job satisfaction, and manage stress more effectively when they trust their organization and their coworkers. Essentially, trust comprises of three key components. Number one is vulnerability. So this is when an employee takes a risk within a working relationship. Number two is a positive expectation. So they take that risk because they believe that the other person or their employer will act in a beneficial or fair manner. And the third is lack of control. So employees cannot fully monitor or enforce the other party's action, hence that element of trust. So there's a number of different types of interventions that promote workplace trust. And the first one I'm going to discuss is corporate social responsibility, or CSR for short. So today, many companies consider CSR to be an important component of their competitive strategy. CSR can be exhibited in multiple ways. It can be economic, so that might be a company's economic obligations to their stakeholders, like generating profit. It can be legal, the compliance required of companies within their particular region or industry. It might be expected activities a company performs as a member of society, so that's often referred to as ethical CSR. And then there's philanthropic activities, which might be donations or volunteerism with the intent to improve human welfare. So an empirical study investigating the relationship between CSR and employee trust within the casino industry found that a casino's compliance with laws and regulations, so legal CSR, was significantly impacted employees' levels of organizational trust. And the authors theorized that this was likely because it enhanced their perceptions of the casino's legitimacy. Further evidence suggests that CSR can contribute positively to retention. More specifically, aligning CSR initiatives to employee values can attract and retain top talent. So if an employee derives a sense of identity from the company they work for due to their strong reputation as a socially responsible organization, or because the company meaningfully contributes to a cause that they care about, it can enhance their self-esteem, organizational trust and commitment, and most importantly, work-related well-being. So CSR decision-making is typically top-down and driven by profit-oriented goals, but involving employees can have many benefits to both employee well-being and the organization. So in this way, research suggests that organizations should not only consider their broader organizational strategy when developing CSR initiatives, but employees' preferences and perspectives through participative processes. So a qualitative study conducted across 10 workplaces in Southeast London that was published in the Journal of Business Ethics revealed that involving employees, particularly ones from lower status, lower skilled occupations, in corporate philanthropy decision-making fostered many benefits to both the organization and the employee. Specifically, it enhanced employee engagement and reduced turnover and tension. A separate study published in the Journal of Business Ethics suggests that employee involvement in CSR initiatives can send a positive signal to investors. So by analyzing abnormal returns resulting from announcements made by US Fortune 500 firms about their donations to Hurricane Katrina disaster relief in 2005, these authors discovered that announcements which highlighted employee involvement specifically were less likely to negatively impact investments. So this might be because the donations came across as more sincere, genuine, and ethical. So in summary, when employees play a more central role in CSR, it can lead to a virtuous cycle of employees identifying with the organization and the organization's identity as being more CSR centric. So together, these two features seem to have financial value. Okay, so the second category of interventions that I'm going to discuss is fostering a climate of psychological safety. So employees who feel a high sense of psychological safety in their work environment are more likely to share ideas, ask questions, and voice concerns. Studies show that trust is a critical component of psychological safety, and in turn, a strong catalyst for work engagement and mental well-being. Psychological safety refers to a shared belief held by team members that this team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking and captures a sense of confidence that the team will not embarrass, reject, or punish someone for speaking up. So team members working in this type of environment feel a sense of openness and are less likely to take disagreements personally. So when psychological safety is in place, team members are more likely to contribute ideas. Discussions regarding the team's processes should be richer, and the team should have more time to spend on constructive problem solving because less time needs to be spent on regulating interpersonal relationships. In fact, broad ideas, new suggestions, and divergent perspectives are not only permitted in this type of climate, but encouraged. So a systematic review of psychological safety interventions highlighted two important features of successful ones. Number one is the need to involve team members in the development of interventions to ensure they are grounded in the reality of participants' working environment, so tailored to the team needs, and therefore they're more likely to have a positive impact. And the second is leadership behavior is a strong predictor of success. More specifically, listening, competence, and transparency are all positively associated with psych safety. So in contrast, self-serving leadership, those who put their own interests above their team or their organization, is shown to actually reduce levels of psychological safety. So a randomized control trial by Castro and colleagues zeroes in on the benefits of listening through one-on-one meeting interventions. So this study was conducted within a global pharmaceutical company across 554 teams that represented over 4,300 employees. So it was quite a large study. And these were knowledge workers engaged in various non-routine analytical tasks. So primarily focused on pharmaceutical development and sales. And the teams were geographically dispersed across more than 65 countries. And they were composed of members with diverse seniority levels and varying durations of employment within the firm. So the experiment nudged team leaders to modify their approach to one-on-one meetings with their team members. There were two treatment groups in addition to a control group, and in both treatments, managers received an email underscoring the importance of one-on-one meetings, along with reminders to hold these sessions regularly and focus on individual team members to foster psychological safety. In treatment one, the guide directed managers to focus on individuals by facilitating discussions about their personal needs and aspirations, so thereby encouraging active listening. So this was a very needs-focused treatment group. And the second treatment group was more task-oriented. So managers were advised to concentrate on workplace-related discussions, such as tackling potential barriers to job effectiveness. And then the control group of managers were merely informed about the study, but without a specific reference to psychological safety or any mention of one-on-one meetings. And the core result was that the intervention significantly improved psychological safety at the team level, particularly within the first treatment group. So that was the one that emphasized attention to team members' individual needs. So this yielded a 2.2% rise in psychological safety compared to the control group. And then there was also a benefit that was seen in the second treatment group that was task focused, but it was only about half of the effect size. And then the authors also found that while the treatment modified the experiences of team members and norms at the team level, they did not necessarily translate into changes in their perceptions of psychological safety in the broader organization. So this is very much a team level intervention with team level outcomes. The third intervention category I'm going to talk about is collaboration. So there's some evidence that collaboration is not only a consequence of trust, but can also be a driver of trust. So global labor migration has increased in recent years, and immigrant workers are often recruited into low status and low paid jobs. And so there's some interesting research in this space on how to promote trust among these types of workers. Research in a Danish context shows that immigrants working in the cleaning industry often form social networks based on shared languages and backgrounds, and that conflict between these ethnic groups may arise in the workplace. So this one particular study evaluated the impact of a multi-component intervention on the psychosocial work environment at a multi-ethnic Danish workplace in the cleaning sector. And the intervention included Danish lessons, vocational training courses, and activities to improve collaboration across the different ethnic groups of cleaners. Interviews about the outcome of the intervention were conducted with the cleaners and the supervisors. And the results suggested that the psychological work environment had improved after the intervention, particularly because of the collaboration piece. So, according to the interviews with the cleaners, the intervention led to improved communication, trust, and collaboration. Okay, and that concludes my session on trust, and we're gonna head it over to Will.
Hi everyone, thanks very much, Cherise. I'm going to be covering learning for us today. So learning and development and well-being are often housed in separate teams with separate agendas in many large organizations. But opportunities to grow and continually learn are really an intrinsic aspect of our jobs and careers. It's part of what makes work worth doing and is part of a full life of flourishing. On the other hand, though, imagine you were dropped into a surgical theatre or a high-level board meeting or into the driver's seat of a train. I'd imagine you feel pretty overwhelmed, unless we've got any train drivers or surgeons in the Zoom room here. Please comment if you're there. But ultimately, having the right skills and abilities to complete our work tasks and responsibilities to a satisfying level, that will undoubtedly make us feel better about our jobs overall. Sometimes there might be issues around confidence in our abilities or certainty of our skills, but being able to complete a job well will allow it to be a fulfilling one. There are clear links between well-being and continuous appropriate learning and development opportunities, and this simultaneously allows us to get improved organizational performance. So that's what I'll be covering over the next few slides. So employers that continually offer relevant and diverse learning opportunities and will really reap the benefits of this link between learning and well-being. Employees who continuously engage in learning opportunities that are relevant to their job, they're more creative, engaged, and better equipped to deal with contemporary challenges. Evidence tells us that employee learning is a key driver of professional development. And we've got one great systematic review of this literature on this link from David Watson and colleagues. And in that, they're able to bring out several different types of training opportunities that support our well-being. So yeah, there are several different types that there's clear evidence to support. The strongest of this supports learning that develops psychological and interpersonal resources, especially emotional and communication skills. So training in these types of skills reduces conflict and absenteeism, especially. And this was shown by a study from Leon Perez and colleagues who were investigating a large number of healthcare workers. And in those settings, it reduced antagonisms at work and allowed people to fulfill their job more frequently. Leadership training is probably the next type of learning initiative that is especially important, is relevant and important for both the line managers who are doing sort of people managing, but also their direct report. There's evidence especially around supporting transformative leadership and also family supportive behaviors. So this means encouraging leaders to recognize the family responsibilities and the caring responsibilities that the people have outside of work to allow them to balance their work and family demands. The third type of learning initiative that is there's lots of evidence to support is coaching, which is more tailored one-to-one personal development. And we know from a large number of studies that this can develop skills for both well-being and performance. So really we know that there's this link between well-being and learning, and we know that there are different ways that we can cultivate this specific link. So all of these forms of training I've mentioned, they can support performance and well-being at the same time, but I've sort of framed them as one-off initiatives. What we primarily advocate at the World Wellbeing Movement and at the Wellbeing Research Centre, it's been more of an intangible target, which is a culture of continuous learning. So this means we advocate embedding learning in daily activities so that employees can grow professionally, improving themselves and their organization. So this organizational culture of learning brings benefits for measures like retention and engagement. This is what we see in the literature. However, there are some caveats to learning and development that we need to be aware of. I think crucially, we must be aware that people learn in different ways. Having too expansive offerings can overwhelm some types of learners while benefiting others. There's one study here of workers in the UK, which just makes a distinction between what we call deep learners and surface learners. What this tells us is that it's important to tailor offering to the needs of the workforce. And there are various sort of training needs analyses that we can do in order to assess what skills people are lacking and what they would like to develop. The cultural element of learning also speaks to the importance of the working environment more broadly. We also know that a high stress environment or an environment with job insecurity, that sort of learning environment won't lead to successful training outcomes. And so this means that while learning is good for our well-being and supports our overall growth, learning and development teams should also be seeking healthy work environments so that the training can be effective, not just for that link with well-being, but in and of itself. So it shows that really we've got this virtuous cycle between well-being and development, and they should be closely linked. And we need to think about how well the organization is functioning and how people are treated to allow them to make the most of learning opportunities. So getting a bit more into some of the specifics of learning and what we know from the literature, we probably could do with more research into actually what is best practice and some of these more practical questions. Often academics are more interested in the theoretical questions. But one thing we do know from what's out there is that face-to-face is best. So I'm sure we've all had to do sort of mandatory onboarding courses for days at the start of a new job. And then, the lack of interaction material either just kind of washes over you or there's so much information that it can actually be overwhelming. So yeah, we know from the reviews of this literature that training that relies on this sort of online self-directed learning, it doesn't support that link to well-being. Sometimes it might be essential and for information sharing, but it's not going to sort of bring that sense of personal development. But in contrast, we know that training that involves in-person, group-based, and interactive activities, especially activities that have more reflective exercises, these typically tap into personal development and bring about improved social relationships and improved emotional management skills. So of what we know, this sort of group-based and in-person activities are the most effective, which makes sense. I think, yeah, from my perspective, these are often the most informative, the most fun. You can learn from other people who are also going through, if it's a course or a program or whatever it is, group experience amplifies the value of it. So I'd like to finish up with a bit more of an ambitious agenda as well, and actually links into some of what Cherise has been saying around trust. And the key message that I'd like to get across here really is that we ought to give employees autonomy to accelerate their learning. So workers with more autonomy, so that means they've got control over what, how, when, and where work tasks are completed. Workers with autonomy, they're able to overcome challenges more quickly through improved learning and adaptation to problems. So their sense of empowerment and achievement increases. This increases their confidence and ultimately their overall well-being at work. However, what we should be seeking is what we can call job enrichment. So this entails introducing more challenging tasks that employees welcome in an ongoing development process, trying to improve job control and also people's personal capacities. However, there's some caveats here as well. It's only going to work if employees are trusted by their supervisors, as with most discussion of autonomy. So Cherise has mentioned, some recommendations from the literature, but we can think also on more micro levels. So another step might be the managers can take might be to avoid micromanaging. This is obviously easier said than done, but I think it's trying to show that trust and autonomy and the ability to learn and develop and overcome problems is all interlinked. So several studies demonstrate this link between autonomy and learning. In one, which was investigating call center workers, those who adapted most quickly and easily to new technology were those who were given more control over their jobs. And similarly, those employees in a manufacturing setting, those who are more empowered and had more control over their problems and also had more of control over their learning opportunities, they were able to identify and fix production faults more effectively. And actually, this effect was most noticeable for junior level employees. So I think, yeah, this process of growth and control, it should happen as soon as possible. So ultimately, it pays off to give challenges to and empower employees to learn, perform, and feel better in their jobs. So on that exciting note, I'm going to hand over to Sarah, who is going to discuss appreciation. And I'm sure Cherise and Jonathan will agree that Sarah is a very appreciative person for all of us in our team. So I think there's no one better placed to discuss this topic. Thanks very much.
Oh, that's incredibly kind, Will. Thank you so much. And yes, I have to say I'm incredibly grateful to have the opportunity to work with such brilliant colleagues, as you've been hearing from now. But I just want to ask everybody to just reflect for a second. Have you ever worked on a project or an initiative where you've worked really hard and nobody said thank you? If that happened, did you feel respected? Did you feel valued? Did you feel seen? Have you ever worked as part of a team where some of the other team members got thanked or recognized and you didn't? How did you feel then? Did you feel valued? Were your emotions positive or negative? How might that have impacted on job satisfaction? And have you ever had an unexpected thank you that gave you a lift? The reality is we've probably all had these situations, and intuitively we all know that appreciation and recognition is so key to our well-being and our co-workers' well-being. But it really is important to dig into that and look at what the literature says about how appreciation can positively impact our well-being at work. And there are many positive benefits. If we go to the next slide, please. So first, I think it's the one before. Brilliant, thank you. So look, first of all, there's a lot of research. And by the way, we looked through, as Jonathan said, a large body of literature. We've included sources in the playbook. So if you want to read any of the papers, the ones that we've really drawn from for these slides are there in the sources. But there's a large body of evidence indicating that workplace recognition, when done right, can have the effect of reducing work-related stress. And the mechanism here is because it's enhancing workplace collaboration and trust. And of course, you've already heard from Cherise about trust. Now, on collaboration, there was a really interesting 2023 study which looked at a formal workplace recognition program rolled out across the company and its impact on improving in-group employee support. So that's helping other employees within the same group you're in, maybe your team, your business unit. So there's clear evidence to show that a formal recognition program, whether that involves monetary or non-monetary recognition, can improve employees supporting each other. There's weaker evidence around whether that expands beyond your own team, beyond your unit. There's some evidence that if you add monetary rewards to that, it can encourage collaboration outside of your own group. But there are other considerations when it comes to monetary rewards, and I will get to that. So that's collaboration. when it comes to reducing workplace stress, we looked at studies from contact center employees amongst multiple service firms, retail sector, sales employees, healthcare setting, and university setting. And all of those studies indicated a reduction in workplace stress when recognition is done right. But, and there is a but, because there is a caveat here, there is some indication, and particularly there was a contact center study with 224 contact center employees from multiple service organizations that indicated that when a monetary award is added, that can increase competition. And if you're increasing competition, that acts as a mechanism to increase stress. Now, there are many other benefits that are not listed on this slide, and some of them I thought were really important to mention. They are in the sources that you're seeing on this slide. One of them is positive emotion. And I started out with that by asking you those questions. So there was a very interesting study done in 2020 in a healthcare setting where the researchers analysed workers' emotional state before and after rolling out this recognition programme. And they found that there was an increase in positive emotions, particularly excitement, inspiration, and sense of pride. Some might say that in some ways that's intuitive. Job satisfaction increases. What I thought was really interesting was a study which is actually the first one on the sources list on this slide from 2022. This particular study, the sample population was just over 5,000 employees, all of whom were over the age of 50. And the rolling out a formal employee recognition program that was done correctly, actually, they reported an increased subjective well-being, increased quality of life. What was even more fascinating was comparing the treatment group and the control group. Those who had received the recognition were less likely to suffer from hypertension or high blood cholesterol. And I think that's absolutely fascinating that recognition and appreciation done right can actually benefit our physical health. And there'll be more on that in a minute. Now, of course, recognition can come from multiple sources. So when you're thinking about a recognition program, you need to be thinking about who recognition's coming from, what that recognition looks like, how that recognition is delivered. And because it's such a complex field of research, there is a large body of literature around this looking at different elements of that. You may be familiar with a study that my colleague, Dr. William Fleming, who just presented last, went viral with last year, which looked at individual level interventions and found that in isolation, they are often not powerful enough to improve employee well-being at scale. So when it comes to appreciation, don't rely just on individuals. This needs to come right from the top of the organization. This should be embedded in the organization's culture. That means onboarding new joiners should actually play a role here. Manager training. And I'm going to give you an example in a second of a really great manager training study which improved that culture of recognition. So recognition should come from organization level, manager level, and peer level. We also know that it's helpful, if you're a people leader, you should encourage your team members to reflect on their own strengths. Reflect looking at a project and ask them, what went well? What did you think you did well there? That's reflecting on their own strengths. They're giving themselves self-recognition. Now, obviously, should you agree, you should then reinforce that. But that's really powerful. So if we go on to the next slide then, we looked at quite a large number of studies and we wanted to summarize in a really easy to remember acronym what the guidance around how to deliver appropriate, effective effective appreciation and recognition in the workplace looks like. So we came up with the acronym that you should be SAGE in how you deliver recognition. So first of all, you should be specific. Be specific about precisely what behavior or outcome you are appreciative of. Be really clear. You did this really well. If you can link that to specific steps the person took, or indeed specific results or outcomes, all the better. Just avoid being vague. Secondly, you should be appropriate in terms of the timing of delivery and the setting and even the mode of communication. Now, when it comes to timing, there's a lot of evidence that actually you should deliver that positive feedback as soon as possible after the project or the event is complete. There's no point waiting 6 months until an end of year review to deliver that positive feedback. Now, what's appropriate in terms of setting and in terms of mode of communication will vary by culture, and I'm aware that we have quite a multicultural group here. It's really important to be genuine and sincere. We are all smart. We can smell inauthenticity. And the research shows that it can backfire, where appreciation feels forced, where it feels inauthentic or fake. Actually, that can erode trust in leadership. And we've heard from Cherise, of course, about the importance of trust. Now, critically, appreciation should be distributed equitably across the workforce. This is more difficult in our hybrid world, but the reality is there will be negative consequences if certain individuals feel consistently overlooked or that appreciation is unfairly distributed. So if we think about implicit stereotype associations, which we all know that we can suffer from, as people leaders, I highly recommend you avoid that availability bias or availability heuristic, which is really that tendency that we have to make decisions based on the most readily available or most salient information. So if, for instance, you're a people leader, you're in the office 3, 4, 5 days a week, and half your team are in the office at the same days, the other half are not, ensure that you're giving that feedback and that recognition fairly to those hybrid and remote workers. But this point about equitable distribution is also really important for peer-to-peer feedback, because there is a risk of in-group and out-group dynamics. So look, we all remember high school and we all remember that there were cliques. There are still cliques in the workplace, maybe less obviously. Avoid representativeness bias, whereby you tend to give that peer recognition to people who are quite like you, who resemble you. Again, you've got avoiding over-concentrating on the people in the office versus remote workers. Now, I mentioned a study earlier which looked at 5,000 workers over the age of 50. Another interesting outcome from that study was that receiving that recognition actually supported employee retention of older workers. So it supported older workers in staying in the workforce, which is, you know, a particularly important and impressive benefit. And do think about that representativeness bias by age, by gender, by ethnicity, etc. So if we go to the next slide, please. I've talked already, and I'll cover this one quickly, about considering whether rewards should be monetary or non-monetary. Certainly a lot of the literature does indicate that appreciation, when delivered in a sage manner, really does come with the benefits listed, and it doesn't have to be linked to a monetary reward. A really sincere thank you, you know, is important. Non-monetary awards can include benefits such as flexible working options, paid volunteer days off, employee autonomy. I mean, you know, this is something that I know Cherise and Will both feel very strongly about, and rightly so, and work-life balance. These things are really important. Monetary rewards can be positive. They can offset the negative impacts of really monotonous, demanding work, but do consider carefully what you're incentivizing, because if you want to create a culture of civility where we treat each other with respect, if you want to create a culture of appreciation, ensure that that is very much embedded in the culture, and any monetary rewards don't undo that good or don't incentivize potentially even unethical behaviors or increase competition and stress. So if we go to the next slide, please. The academic research talks about the word civility a lot. I like to talk about the word kindness. I used to work in MasterCard, and our former CEO, Ajay Banga, talked about decency. He talked about the decency quotient. So we all know what IQ is, our intellectual quotient. Most of us know what EQ is, our emotional quotient. But DQ, decency quotient, do we treat each other with respect? Do we value each other, and are we valued back? And actually, in the academic literature, that's the definition of civility. So there was a really interesting study from 2009, and this is on manager training, but it's also building psychological safety, and it's also empowering employees and bringing autonomy in. So this was a study that was done by the US Veterans Health Association. So they provide healthcare support to military veterans personnel. The aim was to consciously cultivate civility in the workplace. They did that by training a number of leaders in the ability to facilitate meetings, and during those meetings or discussions, groups of employees came together to discuss how to build civility, how to build respect, how to value each other better in the workplace. That gave employees autonomy to shape what that looked like and to shape company culture. It also gave employees a voice to share critique without fear of recrimination, which of course is such a huge part of psychological safety, to share their experiences and their ideas. Now, this was run with one weekly meeting for a period of 6 months with 23 groups. And the results were measurable and showed an improvement not only in civility, but also in job satisfaction and collaboration and teamwork. I really like that paper. It's in the appendix, it's the Osatuki paper from 2009, and the intervention was called CREW, which is short for civility, respect, and engagement in the workplace. The paper also gives quite a lot of detail on how they ran that. So I thought that was really interesting. I'll finish quickly with Dr. Kelly Harding. Kelly Harding is the author of the book, The Rabbit Effect. You may be aware that we have a podcast, the Working on Wellbeing podcast, and Kelly was a guest on that. Her research reveals that kindness and human connection can go beyond positively impacting our mental health to also positively impacting our physical health. And she suggests that having a good manager is just as critical as having a good doctor to avoid disease. So with that, I'm going to hand you back to Jonathan.